Hi, Dan Sussman here again. This time in this presentation, we're going to start talking about persuasive writing. And if you do not know what persuasive writing is, or are not familiar with the word persuasive, which is the adjective, or persuasion, the noun, I'll get into that in a moment. Just a word of introduction here, though. Normally, when we talk about persuasive writing, teachers tend to approach this talking about persuasive essays, longer pieces of writing that can be more fully developed than, say, just a paragraph. However, given that I'm doing this presentation for an audience of people who may be new to the English language and are really just beginning English language writers, I'm going to scale it back. And we're going to talk first about persuasive paragraphs. And later on, we'll talk about expanding those paragraphs into essays. So let's get going. First of all, let's talk about what a persuasive paragraph is, and more to the point, what persuasion is. A persuasive composition is one that tries to sway or persuade, or another word is convince, the reader to think the same way about the topic as he or she does. So in other words, the word persuasion or to persuade means to convince somebody, to bring them around to your point of view. And you know, when you think about it, if you go beyond just writing, we try to convince people or persuade people of our point of view every day. If you don't think so, think about if you have children, the last time you had to try to convince your child to do something he or she didn't necessarily want to do. Or perhaps a spouse, same kind of thing. Maybe there was an issue in your neighborhood and you wanted to convince your community leaders to do something like open a park or put up a stop sign. In all likelihood, what you had to do was persuade them to see your point of view. So the art of persuasion is not something that is just for writing. It's something that we do in everyday life. And learning how to write a persuasive paragraph or a persuasive essay is going to be helpful to you in organizing any kind of effort you make involving persuasion. So, we know what a persuasive composition is. Now, do persuasive compositions have to be totally informative and be as deep as, say, a descriptive or a classification type essay in informing you about the nature of what you're writing about? No. The main thing for a persuasive composition is you want to convince somebody to come around to your point of view. That's your primary goal in writing this. Also, don't think that persuasive writing has to involve just big, earth-shaking topics. It can. Very often we see persuasive writing on controversial topics like abortion, education, a whole range of social issues, but we can also write persuasive compositions involving light casual topics. What's better, potato chips or tortilla chips? What's a better television show, this show or that show? And on and on. So, just like any kind of composition we do, there is a pre-writing aspect to putting together a persuasive paragraph. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to choose your topic. You are then going to brainstorm arguments and place them in a graphic organizer. You are going to pick a side that you're going to take on the subject, and you are going to prioritize your arguments. And we're going to take these one by one and discuss them. Now, as far as choosing a topic, very often your topics will be assigned to you by a teacher, or you will have been given a small set of topics to choose from. Well, if you're dealing in that kind of limited universe, choosing a topic is essentially a pretty easy a pretty easy thing. You either won't have to choose a topic at all, or you'll have a very limited set of choices. If not, if a teacher just says to you, I want you to write a persuasive essay or paragraph on whatever you choose, well, then you've got a big universe to choose from. I suggest that in that case, you choose a topic you are genuinely interested in and enthused about. It always makes writing easier if it's something that you've got some real enthusiasm or feeling for. Next, you are going to brainstorm. And I want to emphasize this. When we pick a topic, we may already have strong feelings about it. And you may be ready to say, okay, well, I'm in favor of this issue, so I'm going to write on this, and I'm going to concentrate all my efforts in thinking about arguments to support my point of view. I'm asking that you do not do that, at least not yet. When you start brainstorming, don't choose sides on your topic. What I want you to do is thoroughly brainstorm both sides of the argument, both the positive side and the negative side. Because believe me, I can't think of too many issues where you could not make an argument for each side, a good argument. So keep in mind that brainstorming involves both sides of the question. Don't decide which one you're going to write about. And you're going to create a graphic organizer to list your arguments. And we're going to take a look at a sample of the graphic organizer I have in mind in a moment. Here it is. I've taken as an example of my topic, should people use bicycles to make short trips? Now notice that this is a yes or no question, and if we phrase persuasive essay questions in this yes or no form, it makes life a whole lot easier. So what I want to do is think about all aspects of this question, both the positive sides and the negative sides. So on the positive side, I came up with 5 arguments about why people should use bikes to make short trips. Can decrease pollution, can result in better health, reduced gasoline consumption, slowing down our busy lives, and less use of cars means they will last longer. Okay, but I also thought about the negative side of the question. Now, there doesn't have to be as many, you don't have to have an equal number of arguments on both sides, but you should have at least a few for each side. So I live here in the city of Phoenix, which is a very car-oriented city here in Arizona. And I said, riding in Phoenix traffic is dangerous. And because we have spectacular heat here in the desert Southwest, during the summer it's almost always above 100 degrees during the day, I said it's often too hot to rely on bicycles in Phoenix. And a third argument I put down is it's too difficult to carry what you need, groceries, packages. Now, I came up with the arguments on both sides of this question with just a short amount of brainstorming. I didn't spend a lot of time on it. I suspect that if I spent a few more minutes thinking about this, I could come up with more positives and more negatives. And if you do, just list them. You might be thinking about, well, how can I write about all of these in one paragraph? Well, we're not going to. We're going to get into that. All right, now that you have the arguments for both sides, now I want you to pick a side. I want you to review your arguments and choose your position on the issue. By the way, sometimes you don't always have to pick the side you actually believe in. You might want to pick the side for which you can make the strongest arguments. Or, for that matter, a teacher might tell you, not only give you a topic, but they might tell you which side of the topic they want you to argue. So, think about which side has the strongest arguments. It may not be the one that you necessarily believe in, but if the job is to persuade somebody of your position, it may be the way to go. When you have picked your side, draw a circle around the plus or the minus on your organizer to help you remember. Next thing we're going to do is going to prioritize our arguments. For the side you've picked, I want you to choose your 3 strongest arguments and prioritize them. You label your strongest argument number 1, what you feel is your second strongest argument number 2, and I shouldn't say your weakest, but your third strongest argument number 3. Now, what if you have 5 or 6 arguments on your side? Well, we're just going to pay attention, in this case, to the 3 strongest. Now, suppose your teacher said to you, I want you to produce a paragraph or a composition with 4 arguments to support your side. Well, then come up with your strongest 4. But we're going to take 3 as a good example. When you're doing a persuasive essay, 3 is kind of in the sweet spot. You don't want to overload your essay with arguments, and on the other hand, you don't want to have too few either. 3 is a good number. You want to look at the arguments you've come up with for the other side of the question as well. And you are going to pick one that in your composition you are going to refute. The word refute means to argue against or be against, and you are going to present evidence about why it's a bad idea. Refute is to knock down the opposing side's argument. Okay, so let's see what all of this looks like on the organizer. I'm back to my case with the bicycle trip. You'll see that since I've picked the positive side, if I've said yes to this question as the side that I'm going to take, I've circled the plus sign. Then I've decided that my strongest argument is number 1, that bicycling can decrease pollution. We have a lot of pollution here in Phoenix from cars, particularly during the winter months. And so I've said number 1 is my strongest argument. I've said reducing gasoline consumption is number 2 on my list of arguments. And I think my third strongest argument is that biking can result in better health. Then I went over to my list of arguments for the other side of the question. And I've actually added a couple there. And I've decided the argument I want to refute is that it's too difficult to carry what you need, groceries or packages. Okay. Now, to write a persuasive essay, or actually a persuasive paragraph, I suggest this form as one to start off with. First, you start off with your topic sentence, and that's where you state your position. I believe whatever. That's your topic sentence. Then you go into your body. Now, I've suggested 4 sentences. You might want to go a little longer, 5 or 6. You certainly don't want to go shorter. But your body should consist of your 3 arguments for your position, the position that you support, that should say. And then you want to have at least 1 sentence in which you refute the opposition's position. And then finally, a conclusion where you reiterate your arguments, you repeat them, and you possibly tie the whole thing up with a closing thought. And I mentioned what the refutation is. You might be wondering why we even put a refutation in. It's because by stating the opposition's point of view, you acknowledge that there are opponents who don't agree with you, and then before your opponents even get to make that argument, you refute them, you knock them down. In other words, you sort of kick the legs out from under your opponent, even though your opponent may not even be there. All right, so let's take a look at a sample persuasive paragraph. And again, we're going to use that bicycling example. Here is my topic sentence. Remember, I said in your topic sentence, you should state what you believe. And I said, I strongly believe that more people in Phoenix should use bicycles to get from place to place. And again, like any topic sentence, everything in my paragraph is going to have to relate directly to that topic sentence. Next, I want to get into the body. So here is where I get into my arguments that support, or actually the supports for my position. First, bicycles are powered by the rider's muscles, so they do not create air pollution. Second, increased use of bicycles would reduce our reliance on gasoline, preserving it for other purposes and allowing people to save money that they'd otherwise spend on fuel. Finally, bicycling is extremely good exercise and would improve most people's strength and cardiovascular condition and help them lose weight as well. All right, so you'll note I have my 3 supporting arguments there for my position. Note please that I use transition words: first, second, finally. Now we get down to the point I'm going to refute. Some people might argue that bicycles are impractical for carrying packages and other loads, but by adding racks, baskets, and panniers to bicycles, people would be amazed how much they can carry on these wonderful 2-wheeled vehicles. So I have acknowledged here that there is another point of view, but I have countered it as if to say, well, yeah, you could say that, but it's easy to answer that argument. So it's a refutation. And finally, my conclusion. As you see, bicycling yields benefits to riders' health and the environment, so greater dependence on them in Phoenix only makes sense. So let's summarize. First, the primary purpose of a persuasive composition is for you to convince or persuade your audience to agree with you about a subject. That is your goal. You should look at both sides of the issue before you take a stand on it and brainstorm as many arguments for each side as you can. Once you've done that, look at what you've got and then decide which position you want to take in your composition. Prioritize your arguments. Prioritizing allows you to decide which is your strongest and which is your weakest. And when you write, you should either, when you are writing the body, you should either go from your weakest argument to your strongest or your strongest to your weakest. You can make a case for doing it either way. You should pick out one argument on the opposite side of the question that you want to refute, that you can knock down and say, well, yes, I know my opponents might think otherwise, but here's why they're wrong, and here is how I answer them. And finally, you want to close with a statement that restates your position. And that is how you write persuasive paragraphs. In a later presentation, we'll talk about how to change those paragraphs, expand them into full essays.